Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about the components of backup infrastructure using Veeam backup and replication. But not only going to cover those essential components of that backup infrastructure, but we want to highlight how you can gain a deeper understanding of these concepts through courses available to you at Veeam University. So get ready to enhance that backup strategy and let's start talking components. So Nate, we've got a handful of components to talk about, right? With Veeam backup and replication. Was there 3, 4 different components that really are the stars of the show?
There's really four main components, yes, and then everything else can really be considered a component as well. You need those hypervisors in the background, NAS servers, file servers to back up. We can even back up the cloud. But going back to it, we have those four main backup server, database, the repositories where you're going to store your data, and the proxies that are going to move it from the source to those repositories.
Okay, so the backup server, let's start there. That sounds like the command center, if you will, like where I can, create those jobs and schedule those jobs. Is that pretty accurate to say?
Yeah, it's the central location where you create, manage jobs and replications from both your source and DR site. You can have that as an all-in-one installation, or you can break it out into all its separate components.
Oh, you brought up something interesting because I had this moment of thought. I'm like, wait, we're talking about 3, 4 different components. That means I'm going to spend like a full day installing all of these, regardless of my environment size. But it sounds like each of these are by default installed when you initially install Veeam backup and replication.
Yeah, when you install it, you can choose whether you have the built-in database installed on that same server, or you can break it out into either a Postgres or a SQL, MS SQL database and a remote server. You have your main drive is automatically created as the default repository when you install, and the server itself acts as a proxy. Now, as you scale, you can easily add more repositories or proxies as you go along.
That's a good point because I was concerned. Like, well, as I start backing my data up, naturally it's going to, exhaust some of that storage. So, what are some of my options for repositories and making sure that my data is kept safe?
You can store it on almost anything. So the repository software can run on Windows or almost any flavor of Linux. Anything that's supported right now, we'll say 2016 or better, right? You can use ReFS on Windows or XFS on Linux to have the fast clone technology and the synthetic full, so you save some space. We also have hardened immutable repositories using Linux, where you get that immutability of the cloud functionality on prem, or you can actually now back up straight to the cloud.
It's brilliant. As a matter of fact, you reminded me of something. I thought I caught wind of that new easy to install ISO, for that Veeam hardened repository, almost making it like that no brainer option. Personally, I think it's great because you don't have to worry about those Windows licenses and you can be a little bit more liberal with those repositories. So that's great. We've got a backup server, which is that control center. We've also discussed the database as well as repositories. I mean, who's going to move this data? Like, what's the heavy lifter of the equation?
Well, that's the backup proxies. And again, almost any flavor of Linux and Windows that are supported. We have generic proxies for NAS devices, file shares, agent backups if you're trying to back up a physical machine. We got VMware specific and continuous data protection specific, which is, no snapshots, it's constant replication. And now, in the newer versions of Veeam 12.2, we have off-host backup proxies for Hyper-V, and we're getting into Nutanix workers, we're getting into Proxmox workers. There's a ton of different options to move the data from one side to another.
Yeah, and not all of it's mandatory, right? We've discussed those 4 big ones that are really required to, grant that functionality with VBR, short for Veeam backup and replication. But it's great to know that this agnostic approach really allows for any environment of any shape and size to be protected, using that Veeam backup and replication.
Yeah, and Veeam likes to call that freedom of choice. You can back up from anywhere and you can restore it to anywhere. You can take a physical machine with an agent, you can restore that to a VM in Azure Cloud or AWS Cloud. You can back up an object storage share that you have for your data to another object storage repository with immutability, guaranteeing that even if some kind of breach were to occur, they can't encrypt your data. You always have it. It's protected.
Brilliant. I mean, even from a standpoint of my data's fine, I just want to migrate workloads from one to another. I can use Veeam even to do some really impressive migrations as well. So that's awesome. I mean, what else? What other aspects of Veeam backup and replication components can you think of that we should highlight before we start sharing some information on how they can learn more about these various components and the roles that they play?
Well, you have, like we said, the immutability functions and the encryption functions that Veeam uses to protect your data, and the freedom of choice on where you can back up from, where you can store it to. The only other real thing that Veeam does better than anybody else is the replication portion, right? Replication and failover. You have a whole another site, disaster recovery. Everything's automated. You're moving the data, copying it over, creating standby VMs ready to fail over at a moment's notice. These are also using secure restore, secure backup. So they're being scanned for malware. We're using Yara rules. We have AI scanning now. Lots of features built in.
I mean, if you can't tell, there's a lot to take in. And that's an amazing problem to have because it's a whole complete solution that's ultimately flexible that can cater, again, to any of those environment sizes. Now, this is just the components. And this video is really stemmed from feedback from you and the community. So if you want more information on various aspects, of course, we have Veeam University as a great resource and tool, but let us know down below, like, what do you want to learn more about? Because we want to make sure you're well equipped with the knowledge in order to handle and create the best data protection strategy possible. So this short video should give you enough information to feel well equipped about the components that are required for Veeam backup and replication. Again, down below, you'll see a link for Veeam University. Highly encourage going and checking that out so you're well equipped for the ultimate data protection strategy. Thank you, Nate. Appreciate your time. We'll see you again soon.